Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are still reacting to the crazy Donald Trump win. Donald Trump expected to get around 312 electoral votes when the counting finally stops. And by the way, that's another thing that needs to be discussed, just how absurd it is in 2024 that a lot of these states take so long to count votes when you've got a state like Florida that can systematically do it and pump out, 5%, 10%, 15%, 20% in a matter of minutes. And these other states just take years and years and years. We have got to, just in the sense of making sure our elections are safe and also giving the American people trust in the elections, get all of these votes counted faster. That's another thing that needs to happen. But let's take a look at this. When it comes to the popular vote winner, there was an expectation. I think this is the craziness of last night. Trump getting to 312, it's just every swing state, right? That's what he won. It was the standard 7 swing states. It wasn't New Hampshire. It wasn't Virginia. It wasn't this crazy. I mean, you could say it's a landslide because of the popular vote, but not necessarily because of the Electoral College. I think an Electoral College landslide is probably around 340, 350. But this, I mean, there was an expectation that Kamala Harris was going to win the popular vote. As you can see, Kamala Harris went into election night with like a 73, 74% chance in terms of winning the popular vote. It really didn't make a lot of sense to me that, I mean, you saw it tighten here to where it was 60-40, and then Harris took this big lead a few days before the election in terms of the popular vote, but we really didn't see the separation in terms of the polls. They were very close. But when it comes to the question of how Trump actually managed to do this, now that we do have basically all of the results in the major swing states, we're still waiting on Arizona and Nevada, but you can just see you've got Wisconsin, Donald Trump winning it by less than a point. So a very, very slim margin in Wisconsin. You take a look at Michigan about a point and a half, if that. Another very slim margin. Pennsylvania has gotten very close, as you can see, about a point. These Rust Belt states, you're really not gaining anything in terms of the popular vote by winning them if you're Trump, because you're only winning them by a point or two. So where did we see the major shifts? And it's really the same thing with Georgia. He only won Georgia by 2 points. He wins North Carolina by 3 points. The major shifts happened in the non-swing states. The swing states were still very, very close. It was the non-swing states. It was a Texas 14-point victory for Trump. It was a Florida 13-point victory for Trump. It was a New Jersey, a state that Trump had lost in 2020 by like 18, 19 points. He loses New Jersey by 4. It's a New York. He loses it by 12. He lost by 23 points in 2020. Remember, he lost the popular vote by 4 points in 2020. This is where he's making up ground. California, I'm wondering if it's only 54% in at this point. He's only down by 17. Now I would expect that number to go up. I predicted he would lose California by like 21, but still, that's even a gain if he loses it by 21 because he lost it by 27 in 2020. So that's the interesting thing. The swing states are still very close. This is not something to where, Trump, wins Wisconsin by 4 or 5, Michigan by 5 or 6, Pennsylvania by a lot. The margins were not exaggerated in the swing states at all. They were still very close. Now, obviously, Trump won them all, but the real swing was in the non-swing states. New Mexico was 6, which doesn't surprise me at all. I said it was going to be about 5.5 or 6. Colorado, that's pretty good for Trump, losing by 12 based on the population shifts. I think he lost Colorado by like 14 or 15, but you're making up ground. You take a look at a Kansas. Or I remember that one poll that came out of Kansas. It was an F-rated pollster, but liberals were clinging to it because it was correctly predicted. The margin in 2020 and the 2022 midterms or something. It was a Trump plus 5. The Midwest was just correct. Trump ends up winning Kansas by 16. What was Missouri's result? 19. I mean, it was just every non-swing state swung ridiculously to Trump. Like every single one. Iowa, you're looking at a 13-point win. Ohio, you're looking at an 11-point win. Trump wins Ohio in 2020 and 2016 by 8.1 points each time. And I think this is like 11.5, really. It says 11, but I think it's like 11.5 or around there. Maine, he loses by 7. That's not surprising. But the overall point I'm trying to get at here is it's the non-swing states. Those are the ones that really shifted. Oregon right now, 69% reported. It wouldn't surprise me if Oregon got closer. It's a 12-point. It wouldn't surprise me based on the shifts we've seen if Oregon got within about 9 or 8. But it's the non-swing states that really shifted to Trump, whether they were very liberal states or very conservative states. They shifted further to Trump. Your Texases, your Floridas, your Ohio's, your New Jerseys, your New Yorks, Those are the major states. New Mexico shifted 4 points since 2020. Illinois is another crazy example. An 8-point win with 93% reported compared to what it was in 2020 and 2016. You're talking about like a 16-point win, a 19-point win in those election cycles. It got closer. Indiana expanded to 20 points. All of these states shifted so far, and I mean this tells you the full story. See, Colorado shifted a bit. That's because of the liberal migration from California to Colorado. That's mainly the reason for that. But other than that, you've also got the suburbs in Georgia and a few counties in North Carolina, which doesn't surprise me because there was also talk of liberals moving into North Carolina from New York. But it's everywhere, especially in the Midwest, the Ohios, the Iowas, you go down to Texas, it all shifted significantly to the right. And it's mainly based on Kamala Harris, a few different things. Trump ran a much better campaign than he did in 2020. The optics, just where the country was at in 2020, Trump having to shut down the economy, even as the incumbent kind of having the incumbent advantage, which really feels like it doesn't even exist anymore, or at least not to the same degree it used to. It was a terrible, terrible situation for Trump in 2020 compared to where we are now in 2024, where we're seeing in polls Trump getting the nostalgia factor. It's like, reflect on it. Look back from 2016 to 2020. Would you approve of Trump's job? And Trump was sitting like +2 in terms of approval rating based off of that. So there's a number of things that were working in Trump's favor. The assassination attempt, surviving that, especially it happening in Pennsylvania. And another big reason, and we'll get to the Latino men who did go for Trump, Latino men voted for Trump more than Harris just straight up, which is remarkable. Also, white men, white women. I know a lot of people are saying, well, why are people blaming white women? They voted for Trump. People owe them an apology. No, white women are normally conservative. It's just when you add all the women together, the minority and the white women tend to be more liberal, but white women themselves are slightly more conservative than they are liberal in elections normally. But the other thing to talk about Kamala Harris is just a terrible candidate. She did not get a turnout. She's at right now 67 million. Now she's going to get over 70 because of California and Washington still coming in, and probably some more vote in Arizona. She might not even get to, no, I think she will get to 70. It'll be close, but you're talking about Biden getting 80 million votes compared to Harris possibly being under 70 million. There was no enthusiasm. There was no turnout. It was totally fake. And when you don't have a primary process and nobody can really galvanize behind you, people don't really, there's no connection and everything is drummed up. I mean, the media, they were the ones saying that Joe Biden needs to get rid of Kamala Harris as VP because she was so bad and it made the Biden-Harris ticket more unlikable. That's how bad she was as VP. They were saying they need to remove Harris, the VP. And then this is just a good example of the weird swings we saw when it came to this election. And again, what I'm talking about is you're seeing all these crazy swings to the right in non-swing states, but the swing states themselves really didn't shift much at all. Now, sure, they shifted to Trump because he lost them in 2020 and won them in 2024, but the margins were not exaggerated at all. And so when you look at the betting, especially when it comes to the Senate races, there was a point last night to where Trump went up in obviously all of the Rust Belt because that's just the way they count. They dumped a bunch of the day of vote from liberal areas like Detroit County and also in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia County. And then Trump takes the lead in all three of them. You can see, I guess McCormick is still a slight favorite. We'll see if he can win. But you look at Wisconsin and Michigan, there was an expectation at a point that Hovde was definitely going to win because it was mainly a reflection on how the country was voting as a whole. And you would think that would also reflect in the Rust Belt. Like, Trump would be able to win Wisconsin by possibly 2 points. Hovde was performing relatively well. I'm surprised Hovde lost, honestly. But again, it just goes to show you, the Rust Belt really didn't move much at all. I mean, Ohio moved, but they don't even classify Ohio as part of the Rust Belt because it's a Republican state at this point. But it's just interesting how there was a certain point last night because Hovde went ahead, Trump was ahead, and it's like, well, if every state's moving to the right, we could kind of think that Hovde's probably going to win, and he goes up to like 92% chance, and you can see Baldwin ends up overtaking him earlier this morning, and it's the exact same thing that happened to Mike Rogers as well. Rogers goes up to around 80, almost 87, 88% chance, and then he ends up losing, and I think that race was just called. So that just goes to show you we didn't see the crazy shifts in the Rust Belt that you would think we would see if the rest of the country, and this is a turnout thing as well, maybe people in non-swing states, especially liberals who really didn't care much for Harris and kind of thought she was installed, they didn't vote for her. That could be it as well. But it is interesting, the dynamic between the swing states still being very close. Although, listen, you'll take a 2-point victory in Georgia, you'll take a 3-point victory in North Carolina. There's no doubt about it. But there's not that extra, because you would think, and it's not like the states reflect each other entirely, but if New Jersey's a 4-point loss for Trump, you would think North Carolina, I mean, it's not exactly, because you've got people, liberals moving in there and stuff, but you would think it would be like a 4 or 5-point victory at least in a North Carolina. But maybe that is just a lack of turnout, more Republicans, in New Jersey. Trump had a huge rally in New Jersey. New York was only 12, but it's just interesting how we're seeing the Rust Belt stay basically the same. It wasn't like he blew her out in Georgia. It was a 2-point win. There were suburbs in Georgia that moved to the left, North Carolina, but it's the non-swing states that really made this so overwhelming. And then obviously winning all the swing states. And Nevada, we're still waiting on the margin when it comes to that. But when it comes to the presidency, I mean, Trump, they've got Trump. Trump's going to win Nevada. There's no doubt. I think Nevada was actually already called. It's just Arizona is the only one that, and it's because of the way they're counting their votes. They're so slow. I have no clue how. This is not something that can be done to where whatever you got to do in terms of the legality of it, there needs to be an emergency thing. This voting cannot, or the way you count votes in Arizona needs to change immediately. We cannot do this again. Whatever you're doing, it's not working. If we needed to divert funds to make sure things, we have to do something to fix your process. It's not working, and they're just beating their head into a wall. The way they count votes in Arizona, it is terrible. And by the way, I think Michigan was really slow as well. I mean, it's just some of these states. Michigan was at 30% forever. Pennsylvania gets to like 90%. You've got to follow the Florida model. And then they say, well, Florida had an entire infrastructure built on counting votes because of the 2000 election. But it's like, is it really that hard in 2024 to get these states to count votes properly to where we can have it smooth sailing? And I think something at some point, there's going to have to be some legal thing. And it's like all these states have to count votes a certain way so we can have the results. And really the only reason we had I'm not going to say that because technically Pennsylvania, I would say Pennsylvania counted good enough. It was similar to 2016, basically, in terms of how they counted, because these states were still very close and they were able to call Pennsylvania last night. But some of them, like Arizona, Nevada, forget about it. The way that they counted, it was terrible. But either way, guys, the reason Trump won the popular vote, it was the non-swing states and Kamala Harris being a horrible candidate, lack of turnout for Harris, no enthusiasm. I'll tell you what, the Gallup Party ID was absolutely right. They said it was a 1.3 Republican advantage. Trump's probably going to win the popular vote by around 2, maybe 1.8. And then the second thing, the one thing that Gallup got wrong was the enthusiasm, because they did a poll on, are you enthusiastic about your party? And Harris supposedly won that by 10 points. That's totally wrong. And that's based off of her getting 10 million, 11 million less votes than Biden. And obviously there could be some other things at play when it comes to Biden receiving 80 million votes versus Harris getting so many less. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.